Hello and welcome back to the Academy of Historical Fencing. Quite a number of people have been asking where I've been for the last few weeks, and it's true there have been a serious lack of videos. Now that's been down to a few reasons that I'm going to go into. First of all, I'd like to say the reason you're joining me here in somewhere rather different is that I'm on holiday in Spain, and I thought better to get a few videos whilst I'm out here than wait till I get back. Now, I took a 2-month gap to work on a classic truck that I was working on to use through the summer, and that is why there's been a 2-month gap in videos. Also, at our Bristol club, we have moved to a much smaller location just for a very short-term period whilst building work goes on. And we should be back to our normal location in about 3 or 4 weeks, and then we should see a return to some interesting sparring videos. You'll notice that last sparring video put up between Jonathan and myself with the Storters. That was at that new temporary location, and it's really tight on space, so we're having to be a little bit careful with space and a little bit careful with length of weapons at the moment until we get back to our regular location, which will be very soon. Anyway, on to today's subject. I wanted to talk about the comparison of training in sparring and drilling. And when I say a comparison, I mean what kind of proportion I'd like to see between the two, and how you emphasise the training of one over the other. There's quite a few sort of differences of opinions on this one. I'm going to talk to you about what we do as a club and why we do it, and hopefully it'll give you a sort of a good overview of how we train. Now, the first thing to talk about is the difference between drilling and sparring. Is most people would say you learn most of your sort of technique through your drilling, and to some degree that is true. In an ideal world, I think you'd probably want to spend at least a few weeks drilling only before you're sparring, but it's not an ideal world, and the reason that we actually train the way we do today is not the reason that people trained a few hundred years ago. By that, I mean that we are training mostly for fun. Which to a degree, a few hundred years ago in the Renaissance, fencing was done for fun, not just for self-defence and war and all those other things. It was done for fun as well, but today it's really one of the only reasons that we do it, our own personal enjoyment, and therefore our priorities are a little bit different. Now, if somebody new came to me and said they wanted to learn fencing, particularly something linear, like rapier or sabre, I would say you'd want to spend a few months on footwork, but I also know that almost nobody would stick at that. It is just painfully boring. So you have to weigh up the differences between what is good for your learning, what is good for a student, and what is actually going to keep a student and keep you interested in what you're doing. So those things can affect the issue quite a lot. In that regard, when people come to the Academy of Historical Fencing, we have them sparring on their first day, pretty much every single time. Now, that sparring is likely to look horrible. And some people would say that you're going to learn bad habits by getting into sparring too soon. At the same time, I've seen people pick up some horrible habits by drilling for too long without getting into some sparring. And there are a number of reasons for that. If you do not quite quickly start taking what you're doing in your drilling and putting it into your sparring and just testing it, whether it works or whether it doesn't, if you're not doing that fairly soon, I tend to find that it goes just right out of people's heads. They need to be trying what they've actually been drilling in their sparring pretty damn quickly, ideally on the night, and certainly within a week or two. And if they don't, it's gone. So that's why I would say the sparring is incredibly important, and incredibly important early on. I've no doubt that if you emphasised more drilling, more form early on than more sparring, then you will get to that better form much quicker and avoid some bad habits. But again, you might pick up some others. So that's just sort of a brief introduction to it. What we do as a sort of, as a club, as a ratio with these two things is roughly 50-50. We do tend to spend a 50-50 amount of sort of time in the class on drilling as on sparring. We do also sometimes overrun on the drilling if it's going really quite well and we expand on some of the things we're doing. It can overspill a little bit, but at the same time we also then occasionally have all sparring days at our drills. And also, quarterly, we do a Saturday session where both of our clubs get together for 3 hours of all sparring, no drilling. So I would say, as a club, we probably end up with a ratio of something around 50-50, maybe even 60% sparring. It's very rough, but you can see that overall, it's near enough going to be an even split between the drilling and the sparring. Now, what do I think of when you basically split those ratios more towards one direction than another? I think if you go all sparring, or very heavily sparring, then you tend to evolve into very much a sportive kind of form. And by that I mean, if you look at, say, how kendo or sport fencing has gone, is what you're doing evolves specifically to do that sportive type of fight that you're going to be pushing towards. So that's where I tend to find too much sparring takes you, which to some degree is bad habits, and some degree is actually an evolution of what you're doing from the martial arts towards the exact model of your points or sparring set system that you're working on, which can also be an issue with too much tournament fencing. Nothing wrong with the tournaments, but if it's all you do, I tend to see that the swordsmanship just goes basically too far away from the reality of a martial art, too close towards a sportive kind of look. So that's what I find with too much sparring. And then what I find with too much drilling is people develop almost a dance-like form, and yet tend to lack that sort of real martial intent, that sort of fighting people that really makes them a good fencer rather than just looking good in terms of a drill. And that can be a real problem as well. So, overall, what do I think? Well, obviously the way that we run our club is largely the way I think we think is the best way for people both to enjoy themselves and to learn and to become good fighters. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and that's just a sort of basic overview to the subject, and I will post a few more videos whilst I'm out here, and within about a week or so I should be back up and running at home with normal videos again and more sparring footage. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.